Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump's told the killing in Iran has stopped and there's no plan for executions, but he doesn't rule out military intervention. Venezuela's opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado visits the White House following the US capture of Nicolas Maduro. And a complete retreat from Elon Musk as X announces it will remove the editing function on Grok, which has led to widespread sexualized deepfakes. Now, President Donald Trump has told the killing in Iran has stopped and the executions won't take place, but still won't rule out military action. According to the family of Irfan Soltani, the 26-year-old arrested during the demonstrations, he had been scheduled to be put to death on Wednesday. Here's what President Trump had to say.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that on good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll all be very upset, including you will be very upset, but that's just gotten to me, some information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution, which a lot of people were talking about for the last couple of days. Today was going to be the day of execution.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by business editor of Gulf Arabian News Insight, Shane McGinley, and Dr. Elie Al Hindy, Professor of International Relations at the American University in the Emirates. Shane and Dr. Elie, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Dr. Elie, I want to start with you because we just heard from Donald Trump speaking there. Do you think this will be enough to stop US military action?
Well, it seems it did for now, at least. The tension yesterday was very high. All intelligence reports were preparing for a hit. All movement seemed like a hit was going to happen. And then something happened over the night. A deal was struck somehow, somewhere. Of course, the face of that deal is what Trump just mentioned, that the killing has stopped, that there will be no court-martial executions and so on, which is something that could be very positive if it does, but I don't think it is substantive enough to stop an American attack. Obviously, some other deal have happened. It could have been around the nuclear program. It could have been about some changes in the regime's behavior. It could be Hezbollah in Lebanon. It could be anything in that sense. We have to wait and see what was the actual agreement. But for now, yes, it seems that Trump have stepped down from the fact, but of course he cannot be like Obama putting red lines in the sand with Syria and not acting. So at least he's claiming that he achieved something very important, which is that the killing has stopped, which is not very true 100% as far as we know from the people inside Iran.
And it's so interesting because, Shane, what Dr. Elie says, it appears to have stopped military, US military intervention for now. I find it quite an interesting debate which is happening at the moment because it's very difficult, of course, to get information out of Iran because of the internet blackout. But it appears that the protests have subsided in some respects.
It's not surprising because I think if you're, I'm glad there was no attacks on Iran because nobody wants that, especially when it's just over the water from where we're sitting. But I think if you were to look at it from a sort of protesters' perspective, like a couple of days ago, Trump was encouraging them to keep going out and protesting, and he was saying help was on the way. But if you're a protester who has gone out and taken that advice, you're kind of thinking, well, where's the help coming from now? And so no wonder they've stopped protesting because clearly it wasn't leading to any objectives they were getting, and they've realized that they're not going to get any sort of military action. So the only way you're going to sort of push for any kind of regime change, if you're a part of the protest, is if you think you're going to get backup. And there's countless examples in history that I can go down to that I can remember from the history books of when, sort of superpowers have promised action that didn't come through. And I think this is sort of a case of it. So positive, yes, there was no attacks, but for the protesters, I think they're the losers in this. And at the end of the day, they were protesting because of the economic constraints that they were living under. And this is a country with huge oil wealth, and yet the people are living in poverty. So, I do feel for the protesters in the midst of this debate.
And it's so interesting because we talk about the economic situation happening in Iran right now with inflation running at 40 to 50%. Life is very difficult for people. And this was an organic movement that did start because of the economy, but has somewhat gained steam, hasn't it, Dr. Elie?
Definitely, but still, I think we need to understand the fear of all of the surrounding countries, but also of many in the international community, that a potential instability in Iran due to the fall of the regime, without a clear plan of replacement, without a clear image, let's say, or at least a person that can control. It's a huge potential of instability that nobody would like to first be responsible for, and then take the consequences of that, especially in countries in the region or countries that rely on oil or anything like that. The repercussions could have been catastrophic if a regime change was sudden and without enough preparation for an alternative.
Because we did get information today that Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Oman convinced Donald Trump to give Iran a chance. Do you think that was part of why we saw sort of stepping back from the US?
It was another factor, of course, other than the other things that we've mentioned. I don't think anybody was very enthusiastic to a sudden regime change. Not that they love the Iranian regime or they trust it, but definitely they fear more a potential instability that could be catastrophic. But I would like to go back to what you mentioned. What about the protesters? And I have to remind myself and probably the viewers that in the beginning of the 90s, the UN did establish a very clear concept of the responsibility to protect. And it puts the international community in front of its duty to actually support any people that is trying to, improve its future and change its situation and so on. But again, I think that time was a time where countries were more willing to get involved into internal regime changes. Today is quite the opposite, although the concept, in my opinion, is still valid. And it's rarely that we have seen a people really being able to change its situation without a proper international support and the proper international ambiance, at least.
But, we talk right now that things have settled down a little bit, and the war of words between the US and Iran has, of course, calmed, since we were talking about, seemed to be a lot of movement yesterday, and today it's different.
Yeah, it definitely felt like going to bed last night that we were going to wake up and it would be similar to the attacks that we had on Qatar back in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely, because we saw Iran threaten retaliation if the US did hit the country. American bases in the region. But there's still military movement happening at the moment. We can't forget that. Still US military movement in certain places. But right now, Shane, countries around the world, we can't forget this, are continuing to tell their citizens who are in Iran to leave Iran. And I know the UK closed its embassy in Tehran.
Yeah, the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, a lot of European countries have all advised citizens to leave. India has 10,000 citizens in Iran. It's encouraged all of them to leave. We've seen, like you said, personnel being moved around on bases, particularly in Qatar. We've seen a lot of airlines, sort of Wizz Air, Lufthansa, British Airways, avoiding the airspace, which I think is quite interesting as well, because whatever the airspace, like the planes have to pay to go through these ones. So again, when I always kind of think it's interesting to follow the money, and if they're not going through Iran, then they have to go through somewhere else, and which is Afghanistan, which then that means the Taliban. And if this was on the record that back in June when we had the Israel-Iran conflict, that the Taliban was making millions because they were increasing their fees to go through Afghanistan. So there's always someone who's going to benefit
Surcharge.
from. Yeah, exactly. So in the same way that Iran did when they had problems in Iraq and Syria. So there's always someone who's going to make a lot of money out of these sort of situations. So at the moment, it's probably the Taliban.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how it all works? And when we talk about following the money in airspace, how much it does cost to redirect flights for these big international airline carriers. But I think one question on everyone's mind, Dr. Elie, you said this at the beginning to me, it seems like for now, there's going to be no US military intervention. And I think the question is, what happens to Iran next? Because we know the Iranian government is in place still, of course. We know the protesters were calling for change, but how difficult will it be for any sort of reform to come going forward? Where's things going to change?
Definitely, again, we go back to ask the questions we've been asking for the past years maybe. Is this regime actually able to change its behavior into a positive behavior internally and externally? Or is it really part of its identity and it's not really flexible to change things because it will make it more vulnerable and it will be a vicious cycle? When it comes to the US, I do believe that for someone who has claimed for so long he is not into the game of regime change, the logical choice would have been maybe some cyber attacks, maybe some very tactical, precise attacks on the missile program or on the nuclear program again. This would have encouraged the internal dimension. But again, Trump has never stopped saying, even in his first term, I'm in for a deal. I'm not in for a regime change. So I think if he goes back to that, we will see some very specific attacks, some very specific potentially not declared or not adopted attacks by the US, and the demonstrations will continue for a certain time. Trump will definitely try to use this internal and external pressure to get to a proper deal that he is seeking for a while.
But I think the market has sort of spoken, and oil prices are down 4%. So they believe, and one of the analysts said that the immediate risk premium has softened. So everyone seems to believe what Trump has said, and that the oil price has spoken.
So interesting, but I think this is something that we'll be discussing and see what, of course, happens in the coming months. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. And Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, has visited the White House today after an invite from President Donald Trump. It follows a US military operation in Venezuela, which resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro. Today's meeting has been widely anticipated following Trump's decision to back Maduro's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, as well as his past desire to obtain the Nobel Peace Prize, which was, of course, given to Machado. Shane, let's start with you.
It's very intriguing.
Yeah,
there's always like so many elements and subplots going into these things.
I know it is. It's like a novel you just couldn't write. But Shane, right now, what will Machado's arrived? She's been meeting Donald Trump, but what will she be trying to do in this meeting? Almost to get Donald Trump somewhat back on her side, I guess.
Well, Trump has said that he doesn't think that she commands the necessary support or the respect in her home country. So those are the two things that she needs to show a good sort of display of strength. She needs to appeal to the Donald and to his ego. But I think. So does she have the support? Okay, so let's look at a poll. I like a poll.
Yes.
And Bloomberg, credible outlet, they recently did one in Venezuela and asked people, who do you want to lead the country? The majority did go for her, 52%, which is, is a fairly big number. Only about 14% went for Rodriguez, and the rest were kind of don't know or don't care. So I think in that respect there is, but I think. The other thing that she wants to get is to secure political prisoner releases. There's other bits, sort of smaller things. But when I sort of thought about it, what does she want? I think she's basically just, unfortunately, a pawn in the general optics of Venezuela. And I think Trump wants to send a message to Rodriguez. While she has been put in place, she shouldn't get comfortable and realize where the real power is in the Oval Office and not in Venezuela.
But
I find-
again, my question is 52% support enough to control a country? And going back to what we were saying about Iran, definitely the US, but also in general in the international community, they would choose 100 times stability on democracy. And 52% does not mean anything if you cannot control the army, the security institutions, and the stability of the country. That's why it was, I don't want to say a smart move, but this is a good play by Trump to keep the regime in place, just get rid of Maduro, but now keep pushing the regime to cooperate, as Shane was saying, to do what he wants them to be doing. And then he's just using Machado, of course, as a tool to increase the pressure. And Rodriguez, 14%, I guess she is a nobody. She's just a figurehead. But the deep state is controlling the army, security forces, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Security. They are the ones actually holding the regime in place. So it's normal. I think it's very telling, these Bloomberg statistics.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And you kind of wonder then, if Rodriguez is put in place, has the regime really changed? But the only thing that has changed is that, there's US control over what is going in. And of course, oil, it all comes back to oil. Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world.
But untapped, unproven reserves. So it's really interesting. We talk about Venezuela.
So it could be tapped into not in the immediate term. But already we've seen reports on Reuters of, some of the big oil companies considering going into Venezuela, some quite close to home. So I think that is what is going to happen. And Donald Trump, in fairness to him, is very transparent about this is what it's about. Yeah. He's not talking about in Iran or Venezuela that this is a human rights play or anything.
I do think in Venezuela initially it started off with we saw the bombing of the ships, didn't we?
Drugs. Yeah.
Oh, the drug, it started off with that, but I think it's become more and more sort of clear that it's an unproven oil reserves. But I find it really interesting because what we're talking about now is Machado, and she's obviously meeting Donald Trump. But I did speak to a journalist from Caracas a little bit earlier, and I found what he said to me quite fascinating, because I said, how much support does Machado and her democratic movement have in Venezuela? And he said it's a very Western perspective that they think that's what we want in the country. Because right now, he doesn't seem to think that's the appetite, and also that she just doesn't command the power right now, like you say, rightly so, of the military, and she's not enough to kind of rile the people together, which I found quite an interesting perspective when it comes to, who could possibly replace the regime in Venezuela. Because right now, maybe Donald Trump, as Dr. Elie says, did the wise thing, stuck with the old guard, and will play out from there. That's
true. We have to remember also that this same opposition with different leaders has won 2 or 3 elections, but then was not allowed to rule. Even under the Maduro government, they were winning elections. Yeah. And we've had several leaders. So definitely the movement is there. Definitely the grassroots is for change. But then if you can get that change of behavior internationally and behavior internally, same case as Iran, without paying the price of instability, then everybody would be definitely more happy to do it. It seems that the regime was able to switch and do that, and definitely 4%, as you said, the drop in oil prices definitely has to do also with the fact that American tankers have started to tap into the Venezuelan oil, and talks about deals are coming up also.
Yeah, because the Americans obviously want a lower oil price. So if they, Venezuela and Iran are 2 of the biggest players in the oil market, and if they get control of those as well as their own reserves, then then OPEC is going to look slightly weakened.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting because Trump's backing Venezuela, staying in OPEC, which of course he normally criticizes, which I find quite fascinating. But then because you have more control
from the inside,
from the inside of Venezuela's
we criticize
oil.
what we cannot control. If we can control
Yes.
it from the inside, then it's an ideal situation.
It's quite an interesting power play, once again, from Donald Trump, thinking about the oil price and the money, what it all boils down to in lots of respects. But let's talk about this Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. Elie, we'll go to you, because I know Donald Trump really felt like he deserved to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And in all honesty, we have to say one thing about Donald Trump. He's been in power for a year or so now, and he's got the ball rolling on a lot of different things happening.
That's true, but none of the peace deals have been full and completed.
Don't tell him that.
Well, okay, we will not, but definitely he promised everything on day one. This will be solved, that will be finished, etc. He still speaks about ending the 3,000 years of conflict in the Middle East, and the war is still waging in Gaza, and still there are attacks in Lebanon, and things are still ongoing.
Ukraine.
In Ukraine, there's zero advancement in that, sometimes blaming Zelensky, sometimes blaming Putin. So again, definitely he believes he earned it, but maybe next year. Let's see how he goes on his second year in term. Definitely he's a guy who is all for making deals and so on. On the technicality, of course, we all know that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee did not allow Machado to be dedicating it or even offering it to Trump, so this is out of question. But I was always wondering, if she had given it to Trump immediately back then, would she have been the president of Venezuela today? Maybe, we don't know. But again, all the other factors we spoke about come into play also, not only the ego of Trump and not only the how much he likes a person or not.
I think she will hand it over to him, I think.
Yeah, maybe symbolically, but then she would be reprimanded, I guess, by the Nobel Peace Committee.
Yeah, exactly. But then they also said it can't be revoked, so they can't take it back off her either. So, but it'll be good optics.
It'll be good PR.
Do you remember, like, with the FIFA trophy? And all that?
Will it help her popularity in Venezuela?
No, I don't think it will.
Exactly.
No, I don't think it will.
I think that will be, let's wait to see. But as you say, it's about PR.
Yeah.
So let's see what she does. But thank you so much for your thoughts there. Let's move on now. And US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has announced phase 2 of Gaza's peace plan. It involves disarming Hamas, rebuilding the region, and creating the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. This committee will be overseen by Donald Trump's Board of Peace. So, Dr. Elie, this is quite interesting because phase 2, we're in it now. What does that mean?
It's at least a positive sign that things are moving. So let's be optimistic and say that things are moving somehow. We do have now that the committee, the National Committee for Administration of Gaza, we do have it in place. Not everybody is happy with the names, but the committee is there. It's going to meet in Cairo soon. We do have, it seems, some kind of an understanding of who are going to be the multinational forces that are going to be there, and it seems that Egypt is really going to have a big percentage of that once again. So yes, things are moving, yet we have to remember that there are so many questions more than answers, so many conflicts, so many issues that are not clear. We have to remember this is the phase where we have the disarmament of Hamas. There's a lot that is happening and nothing is clear on that side. We have the Israeli withdrawal to a certain part of Gaza. Also, this is not clear or visible to be happening anytime soon. And then reconstruction, who's going to pay? And how is it going to happen? And all of that. So a lot of questions. Glad that things are moving forward. It's a good sign. But we need to start to see answers for these questions as we go to really have the Palestinian people first, but then also all the region feel that we have actually moved into a new phase.
And I think $50 billion is the price of reconstruction, will be estimates.
Yep.
And like you say, who's going to pay for that? How long is it going to take? And it's also the withdrawal of Israeli forces in Gaza and Hamas. So it's all up in the air at the moment. But Shane, you know, we've spoken about Hamas disarming.
Yeah.
Dr. Elie mentioned it there. And they've been warned of consequences if they don't apply with obligations.
Yeah.
We don't know what those consequences look like, do we?
No, we don't. In terms of the obligations, when I was looking up, it's basically to return some of the deceased hostages that are still outstanding. So in terms of the consequences, I looked everywhere, and there is nowhere where it says what these severe consequences. But if we were to sort of speculate, some of them could be, to put sanctions on some of the financial structures that are supplying Hamas. The other one then is some of the phase 2 benefits that were due to come in or are in place, which is the aid, like you said, the reconstruction. All of those costs, would be stopped. And then the ultimate, unfortunately, is a return to full-scale military action in the region, which we don't really want to go down that route. And I think the positive in the reports was saying that, from the Palestinian side, there was support for this move into phase 2, and also for the mediators in Turkey, Qatar and Egypt. So that is the positive side of it. But I kind of think like the 50 billion even that you're talking about, that it's kind of like if you look at when the Syrian regime was overthrown, there did seem to be a kind of momentum to go back in and support all of the infrastructure, and there was all of these deals announced. I sort of personally feel that that momentum around the Palestinian story has sort of been lost.
Yeah.
A little bit right now, because I feel we just been discussing Gaza and the second phase of the peace plan. It kind of took us by surprise, because that hasn't been the main focus of the news, where for so long that was the focus. And I do agree with you on that. And Dr. Elie, I guess, has momentum been lost when it comes to making sure that everything is in place?
Attention, definitely. Momentum, definitely. But still, we have the impression that things are moving a little bit. However, going back to what Shane was mentioning, first concerning the sanctions, I don't think any leader in Hamas is not on the sanctions list so far. But we have seen also, very importantly, to what you were saying, that the general umbrella of Hamas, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, have just been put on more sanctions, and specific entities in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria have been put under sanctions once again. And we have even seen Turkey move against some Islamist groups, which is also a big shift in the sense of where does the Turkish regime put himself. So I think in that sense, we have the feeling that a page has been turned. Hamas has no option. Definitely they are trying not to surrender their weapons for nothing and get something in return, maybe a phasing out of their control of Gaza, but I don't think they have a choice, and the repercussions could simply be, again, assassinations of their leadership, attacks on Gaza, and so on. So unfortunately, they are now the weaker side. They have signed the deal that mentions their disarmament. If things don't go well, an escalation could again be there. Are we heading in the right direction toward solving this problem completely? Yes, but maybe not in favor of a proper establishment of a proper Palestinian state, which then will put us into a whole question mark of how this conflict is going to be on the long term.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. And Elon Musk's AI chatbot, Grok, will no longer be able to edit and undress photos of real people. It's a massive retreat from X following a global backlash and widespread concern over sexualized AI deepfakes. The announcement was made hours after a Californian prosecutor said the state was investigating the spread of these images, including one of children. So, Shane, this has been really interesting because what made Elon Musk blink first? Was it the California court? Was it pressure from all over, different governments?
I think it was Keir Starmer in a bikini, probably. That was the deciding. I think this was something that was well overdue. And as I was just sort of thinking of an analogy that came to my mind when we were talking before, and the way there's that old saying that you give someone a fish, they'll eat for a day if you give them a fishing rod. But in terms of sort of perverts and pedophiles, we're always trying to stop them getting access to images. So do we really want to give them software that they can make their own images? That doesn't make any sense in this term as well. And I think Musk probably he's all about sort of freedom of information and, regardless of what you want to say and whether you agree. I think he probably realized that this is not a battle that he wants to lose on. So I think he probably rightly said, okay, you do not really want to go down in sort of sexualizing images or doing any of this regard. You're not going to win on that battle. And I think it is right that this has been stopped. But on the flip side of it, I think if you're going out determined to find these images, you will just find another software that will do it, or a software will be developed by other sort of tech bros to facilitate this. If there's a vacuum and a demand, supply and demand will mean that this will happen eventually. But if there is software that is in the public domain that we can control, I think that should be done. So I think this is a positive thing, but I think it doesn't close the gate and stop this kind of sinister activity happening, unfortunately.
And it's so interesting because I do think, like what you said, people can always find workarounds, can't they?
Yeah.
But something like X or Twitter, once
They should be
knowing-
seen to adhering to on
because
the
it's
mainstream.
more of the mainstream, isn't
Yeah.
it? So it's quite an interesting debate when it comes to that. And I do think that he thought, I'm not going to win this at the moment, especially when we see
No.
other countries like Australia really cracking down.
I think his reputation is not the one. This is the one he wants to sort of
No.
fall on, and especially if he wants to continue to get his $1 trillion package.
And
Well, I don't think, again, two sides. First, calling it an issue of free speech is a bit of a stretch. So,
Yeah.
yes, you are free to do what you want and to say what you want, but not with other people's privacy or other people's things. But then again, on the other hand, is this possibly stoppable? Can you stop it? There will always be some way around it. And again, we're putting more regulations on Western/American companies that are operating under proper law, and we are letting the field for other that are less controlled or less legalized or framed things, which would make them lose a lot of the competition in so many ways, which makes it unfair to them in general. I guess other ways could have been thought on how to prevent this, or at least how to punish any abuse of this material that could have been done in any way and in so many different tools used. Better laws would be reprimanding or punishing based on the damage that is caused by the person, and potentially making the companies also responsible for that part of the damage. And this will make them auto-regulate automatically without putting such a radical measure of canceling a feature that, I don't know, could be used in different ways or in a proper ways, if I may say.
Yeah, or even like it's sort of like ChatGPT. If you ask it to do certain things that I think, oh, this could be used for an illegal activity, even though if you're asking it something quite simple.
Yeah.
So I think it just, yeah, if you want to say like put Keir Starmer in a bikini, I don't think he's going to sue you. That's sort of fairly harmless, I would think. But if you take it to the extreme, then the process should just say, it's not going to do it. It should be self-policing. It's supposed to be AI at the end of the day.
And I find that concept of self-policing so interesting because we've spoken about that so many times, especially when it comes to regulation. Who regulates this growing industry of AI? Is it government? Is it the tech bros? Sometimes I think it should actually be parents if you have children, but that's a whole different argument. And that's what people just can't seem to agree on when I look at this.
Definitely, again, it's a tool like any other tool. Remember what we spoke about the internet years ago. Before that, we spoke about computers or any new technology that could have been used for the bad. It was used for the bad, but it was used much more for the good, for the benefit, for the advancement of humanity, and so on. So I think any tool will have these edges, and it will take all the support and, let's say, cooperation of all those that you mentioned. The parents first, the user also, then going to the companies, then going to governments who have the responsibility. But we have to treat it like any other creativity. Like if I have an actual picture of you and use it in a wrong way, it's the same as using it through AI, and if I post it or whatever. So I think we need to keep that in mind, keep freedom of speech in mind, and actually move the discussion towards how to punish any abuse rather than prevent beforehand, because it's going to be a slippery slope of where do we stop putting bans and whoever likes and dislikes things.
Yeah, because it's going to become increasingly difficult to control something like AI. The bigger and bigger it grows. But Grok spicy mode did allow users to create explicit content. I mean, with a title like spicy mode, Elon Musk must have thought, oh, this could go down a really wrong path. Maybe I should have thought about this a bit harder.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, you know, it's probably something that he thinks is probably harmless, but then, you know, he's a father of, like, I don't know, 25 children or something. So I think he probably realized that, you know, this can be taken to the full extreme and to the perversion level. And like you said, it's not something that he probably realized that he's going to win the battle on in terms of reputation.
But can you imagine how much spicy mode got him new users and new payments? So again, if these are private companies seeking profit, then this is something that they would do.
And I have to say, like you said, it probably did generate a lot of publicity because this sort of general debate, I thought, well, I've never actually used Grok as a search AI engine.
So first time I used it.
Yeah, exactly. So we've all done that.
Was because of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you the same?
Yeah, I downloaded the free version. I wasn't going to sign up for the spicy version or anything. But I did notice the tone of it is very different than ChatGPT.
Oh, you were offended by the tone, weren't you?
Well, I wouldn't say offended. It's a bit more
surprised.
Like ChatGPT is very much sort of subservient, sort of your best friend, sort of personal
tells you
assistant.
what you want to hear.
But no, some piece of writing I put in Grok told me it was pretty awful actually. So I was like, oh my god, and it wasn't even like sugar-coated or anything. So I think I'm going to try use both of them to get like a balanced view.
Yeah, well, I think Grok's probably got the attitude of Elon Musk,
definitely,
doesn't
100%.
he? It's got that attitude.
We've mentioned before that it is allowed to swear at you. Like if you annoy it, it will actually use bad words in its responses. So yes, definitely Elon's attitude is part of it. And I guess the freedom for that AI not to go in one direction is also part of his brand or what he does.
I quite like the idea if I annoy someone for them to swear at me. It feels quite real life, doesn't it? But anyway, let's move on. And it's that time of the show where Dr. Elie and Shane have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. I must admit something, Shane. I absolutely loved your story. And it was all about something that we've all used, because we're talking about AI now. But before AI and ChatGPT and Grok and DeepSeek, we used to use something called Wikipedia.
Yeah,
and it's celebrating a big birthday.
Yeah, right today, unless we obviously not got past midnight, it's 25 years.
Wow.
A quarter of a century. And like, I can remember, do you remember when it came along and it replaced, remember Britannia, and you'd have to go and get your encyclopedia off the wall and stuff like that. And it's very quick. I think there is parallels to what we're talking about AI, because quickly Wikipedia sort of became a slang word for bad research, inaccurate, lazy journalism.
So it's really interesting.
All of that kind of thing.
You know, we have a meeting before here, and Beth, our editor, we were all talking about this, and her and I were saying when we first started in journalism, Wikipedia was just a no-go.
No, like a taboo. Yeah. And it was pretty bad, I remember, and but it has improved a lot because it gives you the exact sort of sources of all the information, and there's thousands, probably millions maybe, of these Wikipedia editors who update it on a regular basis. So I do use it quite a lot, but in the same way with AI, I've always said it's like Wikipedia, where if you read something in Wikipedia, then go check the source. Is it from the BBC, ITV, Al Arabiya, somewhere? So, yes, I know. So as long as it's a proper source, but a lot of the time with AI at the moment, it doesn't do that, which is the problem. So whenever I ask it, if it gives me a stat or something, it's like, okay, well, where does that come from? And then eventually it gives you. So I think it's taken 25 years for Wikipedia to get to sort of that sort of credibility stage. And I think AI will probably do it like in a year, ChatGPT or something.
But we have to remember and salute, why did this all start? When that guy
freedom of
decided,
information,
to give the public access to otherwise secret documents.
And it has remained a non-profit organization, which the AI ones aren't. But then just very quickly, I did look up what the 25 most popular Wikipedia pages are. It's quite depressing. The number one by a huge stretch margin is a list by year of famous deaths. Deaths. So you can go in and see who died last month. When did David Bowie die? When did Queen Elizabeth die. And Queen Elizabeth is 4th. Donald Trump is 3rd. He'll be very happy with that. Cristiano Ronaldo is 6th.
Wow.
Taylor Swift is all the way down at 16th, and she is 3 below Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
I wouldn't have thought that.
But Adolf
Game of
Hitler will be
Thrones.
used for history.
Yes.
You know, if you look at like people going back in history, it's something that's studied and looked upon. So people would.
I bet that
use that for
Taylor
research.
Swift is parents trying to understand their children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who is that person?
Yeah, who's the Swifties?
Yeah, but I find it absolutely fascinating that people always wonder about death, not about births, as you did say. In the meeting
It's
before.
amazing. It's amazing. I guess, but again, this is an example of a tool that you can use for whatever, positively or negatively, in your good mood, in your optimism, or in your worst situation. But definitely, it has left a mark on the way we do research, on the way we understand things. So
I wish I had
25 years.
Wikipedia when I was at university. But anyway, moving on. Dr. Elie, yours is quite a different story, but it's all about Starbucks customers in the UK.
Yes.
They woke up super early today and they wanted
5
to...
a.m.
5 a.m.?
Yep.
Criminal. But they wanted to get their hands on something really special.
Well, we had long queues starting 5 a.m. simply to get the new barista, which is the new cup that
There it
Starbucks.
is.
Here you go. So it was launched in the US. It made the big, huge fuss in the US, and now it was the launch in the UK. And the lines were crazy, and the people were going crazy. They were fighting in the stores. Shelves were emptied in minutes just to get your hands on this teddy bear
Barista.
with his head and with his straw coming out of the hat, so you can drink your coffee in a nice way, in a berry way, I guess.
A berry way.
I don't know what you want to call it.
They were
but-
fighting in stores.
Oh, definitely.
The world's gone mad.
And this is supposed to be selling for £27.95. It was on Marketplace on Facebook up to 400 pounds, 300 pounds.
Wow.
And there's a anecdote, I'm not sure how accurate it is, that one was sold for 1,000 pounds in that sense. So it is really craziness. I don't know why would
It's
people
quite
be
cute.
so
It's
into.
quite cute.
Yeah, okay, but not to wait in queue
No,
for
no, I
5
wouldn't.
a.m.
I wouldn't.
And
I think
yeah.
anyone who waits in a queue for something, it concerns me. I
yeah,
don't know why I feel that way. So would you be buying one, you think? You'd go and fight?
No,
in the shop?
unfortunately
You'd fight in the
not.
shop?
No, I wouldn't queue for. I don't queue for Apple iPhones. I don't queue for
No.
Labubus.
Exactly.
I don't queue for any because I think.
No, you didn't get a Labubu?
No, I didn't.
I've got a Labubu. I love the. Do you know what?
Come on, Leigh-Ann.
I'm not into this plastic bottle phase. It really irritates me. But that's a whole different conversation. But I look at this and I think, God, that's a waste of money. $27.99 because I've got about 5 in my cupboard.
Yeah.
But I did want a Labubu, and I did get a Labubu. So maybe,
Yeah.
you know, we're charmed by all these different fads.
I think when it was launched in the US, it was quite Christmassy, so people, got attracted to it. But now it doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you buy any other things? And the one that doesn't have the Starbucks logo is selling online for £16.
And you can write it on
Wow.
there.
Yeah, you could write, you could stick on it
Yeah.
a Starbucks logo. I mean, it's just, consumers' behavior is just amazing, and we keep going down the hill as we
One-upmanship.
go.
I know. Well, I wonder what the next fad will be. We'll wait to see.
Yeah.
Labubus.
It'll be quickly
bear
around the
cups.
corner.
Yeah, we'll see what's coming next. But thank you to my guest tonight, business editor of Gulf Arabian Business Insight, Shane McGinley, and Dr. Elie Al Hindy, Professor of International Relations at the American University in the Emirates. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on X. G&T will be coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.